Welcome to the original Gangsters Patreon members only. I apologize for not having more content up in the last 10 days or so. Got busy with some work travel and some family stuff, but we're going to be putting up a lot more content for the end of for the rest of this month and continuing on the content train as we move forward. And we're kind of stretching our legs here at the members only Patreon, a little different than our normal YouTube stuff and the normal Gangster Report stuff. You guys are going to get all the exclusives and the more kind of analytical insight. So I want to talk about the new Peacock streaming TV series, Fight Night, $1 Million Heist, starring Samuel L. Jackson, Terrence Howard, Kevin Hart, and Don Cheadle. It's a fascinating true crime story that I don't think a lot of people know. I didn't really know a lot about it. But after talking to some people that do, looking at some federal files I was able to get my hands on, I want to shed a little insight into the story that Peacock is telling and kind of separate fact from fiction. So just a quick synopsis. The TV, it's an 8-part limited run TV series. It's about a robbery that took place in the hours after Muhammad Ali's comeback fight in 1970 against Jerry Quarry. Ali hadn't fought for almost 4 years because of his legal issues, refusing to go into the draft. He had to give up his title in 1967. At the end of 1970, October 1970, finally gets licensed in Atlanta, and he fights Jerry Quarry. This was a huge social event as well as being a sporting event, and every major African-American celebrity, criminal, politician was on hand in Atlanta for this fight. And because there were so many crime bosses that were coming together from different parts of the country, many of which worked in tandem, a couple guys decided to host an after party. And the after party was put together by a very powerful, but not so much known African-American organized crime figure named Frank Moten. He was really the first Black Godfather after Bumpy Johnson died. He bridged the gap between, Bumpy and Frank Lucas and Nicky Barnes, who are kind of the three guys that we know the most about from that Harlem drug renaissance in the 60s and 70s. But Frank Moten was kind of the, in some ways, a pioneer. And Moten came from Atlanta, came up to New York City with a Genovese mob drug connection, and started to take over Harlem. He put together this party. It was held in Collier Heights, the west side of Atlanta, and hundreds of invites went out to every major Black crime lord in the country. What Moten didn't know was that his right-hand man, another nefarious person by the name of Cadillac Richie Wheeler, as they were planning the party, Richie Wheeler was secretly planning a robbery without Frank Moten's knowledge. And after the fight, where Muhammad Ali won in 3 rounds, all these people started to descend on this mansion that was owned by a numbers boss from Atlanta named Chicken Man Williams, played by Kevin Hart in the movie. Samuel L. Jackson plays Frank Moten, and Terrence Howard plays Cadillac Richie Wheeler. And as soon as the fight's over, people start showing up at the party, and there really was no party. The party was people dressed to the nines, fur, jewelry, trying to show off, let everybody know that they're the biggest deal in their city. And they show up at this party and they're met with shotguns, with guys adorned in masks. They're, relieved of their cash, jewelry, and furs, and sent down to the basement. There were, I'm told, over 100 people over a 4 or 5 hour period that were stuck down in the basement naked during this robbery. So, I want to lay out two things, exclusive for this audience that you're not going to get on Peacock or anywhere. This is, I dug around the internet trying to find someone that reported this part of the story, and I just couldn't find it. And I'm shocked after talking to people that I talked to. It seems this is pretty common knowledge. So Muhammad Ali was present at this robbery, and he was robbed. That has never really made it into the coverage of this crime, where there was a bloody aftermath. 5 people ended up dead in the months that followed because this was an unsanctioned robbery. One of them was an innocent woman that just happened to be with her boyfriend, who had been one of the conspirators. Cadillac Richie Wheeler was killed as well because he, headed this effort. But Muhammad Ali was present. That's not shown in the TV series, but Muhammad Ali was present and robbed with his entourage. And in addition to confidential informants telling federal government about this, there's also a wiretap. This was October 27th, 1970. Ali was spending a lot of time with the Nation of Islam. This was, for all intents and purposes, the Black Mafia. And a lot of the guys that he was surrounding himself with were being monitored by federal government. One of these people that he was with at the fight wasn't at the party. And at about 5 o'clock in the morning, when the robbery was over with, Ali called this member of the Nation of Islam, whose communications were being monitored, and requested that somebody immediately come to the mansion and give him a fresh set of clothes, pants and a shirt and shoes, because he said that he was sitting there naked in a basement and he had just been robbed. So it's interesting they decided not to put Ali in the middle of the robbery, because that's true. That happened. Another thing that's interesting about the way that the story is told on Peacock is they wanted, my guess is they wanted to leave it more open-ended in terms of who did this, who knew what, who orchestrated this. And in that effort, according to the show, Richie Wheeler is present when they're being robbed. But in reality, the way that everybody knew that Richie Wheeler had been the one that had pulled this off was that Richie left the day of the fight. Had a chance to go see the fight in person, and decided to leave Atlanta and go back to New York City. He watched the fight, I believe, at Madison Square Garden on closed circuit, and was very aware of being seen, wanting to establish an alibi. So that part of the story isn't expressed in the TV show. I wanted to kind of tell everyone again that Muhammad Ali was present at this robbery, and that Frank Moulton's guys pulled it off without Frank Moulton's knowledge, and definitely without the knowledge of the Genovese crime family and the Lucchese's, who had been feeding Frank Moulton. He was being fed by a future Lucchese capo, Johnny Capra, and then the Genovese that were feeding him were guys from the 116th crew in Harlem and the Bronx. Leo Guarino was the main guy, and there were a couple other Genovese that were also involved, guys that trace kind of directly to Barney, who's the boss now. But these were guys that Barney knew, and Barney at that point was a kid. But a lot of the guys that were involved in this, or were involved in the supplying of the guys in Harlem, were eventually Barney's guys. And one of them was a guy named Beansy Delicava, who eventually became a union boss at the Javits Center because of Bernie. But Beansy and Leo Guarino and Johnny Hooks were feeding Frank Moten, who was then feeding Harlem. And Moten ended up going down on a drug bust and a policy bust that came down in 75, 76, went to prison in 77, died in 84. But Moten was directly tied into Ali. So was Richie Wheeler. They were guys that were always around Muhammad Ali's entourage. And a number of books on Ali and the history of boxing in the 60s and 70s, Moten Wheeler's name come up. Burt Sugar, who's the kind of the preeminent mob historian, some of his books, he talks about Wheeler and Moten. Not sure who killed Richie Wheeler. Not sure if it came from Frank Moten or not, but Richie Wheeler did not last longer than about 18 months after the robbery. And then three of the actual trigger men, or three of the actual stick-up men, were killed, and then one of the stick-up men's girlfriends or wives was murdered with them. So that's just kind of my angle into this $1 Million Heist fight night show that's on Peacock right now. Anybody that knows Muhammad Ali, knows the true story of Muhammad Ali, know that he'd like to run around with gangsters, and all of his entourages throughout his whole career pretty much were filled with drug bosses, racketeers, mobsters. And it's not shocked that he got caught in the crosshairs here in a robbery, which ended up taking $1 million in 1970 money, which I'm told could have been like more like 10, 20 million in modern times. Check back this week. We'll have more content here on Original Gangsters, Patreon members only. I'm Scott Burnstein.